Hello everyone and welcome back to Purple Rose Crafts. Today we're going to do our knitted hat video. This is our part 3 of the video where we work on our crown. Right now I've got a hat that is about 5 3/4, almost 6 inches long, and we're about to start our decrease rows. My kids like their hats to be longer, so they can kind of tuck down around their low on their ears when it's cold out. So it's probably a little bit longer than I would usually recommend, but this is just the way that it works best for my kid. So let's start our decrease rows. Now I've also seen a lot of tutorials out there that don't recommend changing anything when you start decreasing, but in this case I actually am going to start decreasing our needle size as we are working through our crown of our hat. So we are using 4.5mm needles, and we're actually going to convert back over here to our round needle. So this is going down to a 4mm round needle when we start our decreases. Now on our hat pattern, we are doing 5 knits and then 1 purl to kind of give us this nice stretchy fabric of our hat. Hopefully you can see that there. So we want to stay in pattern when we're working our decrease rows. So we're actually going to start our decreases right with our very first stitch. We're going to knit 2 together, our first stitch of each of the patterns. So we're knitting 2 together. So we're going to insert our needle here knitwise because we're going to knit it, but we're going to insert it into the second stitch and the first stitch here so we can do our knit 2 together. So we're going to knit the 2 together, so yarn over and then draw back through. Now 2 stitches have come off of our left hand needle, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So now we're going to continue knitting, staying in pattern. So we're going to knit the last 4 stitches and then purl our next stitch. And then we're going to knit 2 together again on this next section. So we're going to insert our needle again, and we are going into the second stitch and through the first stitch on the needle as well. And then we're going to yarn over and come back through and then lift both stitches off. Now these are going to look like they are meeting, and then one disappears as we knit up our crown of our hat. Okay, so we're going to just continue knitting across in this fashion. And so there's our last one. The next stitch is a purl. We just want to keep that nice vertical stripe that we have happening. So we're going to just continue our purls, and that's going to be the last stitch that we're going to knit together, and it's just going to look so lovely once we get up towards the top of the hat. All right, so there's our knit 2 together again. And there's our purl stitch. Insert, there we go, purl, and now we're going to knit the next 2 together again. So inserting our right hand needle into both stitches, yarn over, and then loop it off. Okay, and we're going to continue in this fashion around our row. The second row is going to be a straight knit row, so we're going to continue of course with our purls, but we're going to knit over top of all of our knit 2 togethers that we're doing for this row. We're going to knit our way onto this round needle and eventually back off onto a smaller set of double pointed needles as well in the 4mm size, just to continue once our decreases get a little bit start to get a little bit tight on our round needle. We're going to have to work back off onto another set of double pointed. Okay, so there's the end of our first double pointed needle. It is free. And there's our first row of decreases. When you go back and actually look at the stitches, you can see there's an extra like loop here at the beginning. You're not going to see it, right? Once we get our next row worked over top, it's just going to disappear into the work, and you're going to end up with this beautiful like stripe up the top of the hat. And once I get a few more rows done, I'll be able to show you how that starts to look. Okay, so let's continue this row. And we're going to go back and do the second row. Like I said, it's going to just be knit every stitch except the purls, and purl the stitches as we have been going. And then we'll come back with our third row of decreases, which we will continue in the same fashion. We want to do the knit 2 togethers over top of each other on every row. Okay. All right. So we've done our decrease row, and then we did 2 regular rows. So 2 rows of knits and purls straight, the same way we had been doing for the body of the hat. And now we're ready to do another decrease row. So this time we're going to do our knit 2 together here at the beginning of the row. And then we're going to have 2 more knits before our purl stitch. So we're actually decreasing a lot of stitches on each row. Normally when I'm working on a hat, I probably would start my decreases about every 10 stitches or so, but because of the way the pattern works on this hat, it's only a 6 stitch repeat. So I didn't want to do it every 12 stitches. I wanted it to be less. So that's why I actually did an extra row of straight stitching before getting to our second decrease row. We want to make sure that there's still enough knitted fabric for the remainder of the crown of the hat. Okay, so we're going to we're doing a second decrease row here now. We're doing our knit 2 together with 3 more knits and 1 purl stitch before our next repeat around the hat. And then we're going to do 2 regular rows, 3 knits, a purl for 2 rows on the repeat. And then we're going to do another decrease row, and we're going to continue decreasing in that fashion until we get to around 10 stitches or so left on our needles. Now, I didn't explain earlier why we actually are going to go down to a smaller set of needles. Now, what I like to do when I am knitting the crown of my hat, and it's kind of a little bit more of a new plan that I've done some research on and actually really like, is that the crown of your hat is to make it just really organized and pretty, and just to kind of have a really good look to it. Decreasing your needle size is actually a really effective way to do that. So if you've never tried that before, give it a try. Just decrease about 1 size or 2 sizes of your needles, the same way that we did with the brim of the hat where we did our ribbing. We did that with a 4mm needle as well. Actually, this double pointed needle we're using, this round needle that we're using right now, is the one that we knit our ribbing onto. So that's why I went back to it for the crown. So I really like the way that it ends up looking towards the end of the hat once we've done our crown with the smaller needles. I also like having the body of the hat be really nice, not really loose, but nice and stretchy, so that it can have lots of give and really kind of like hug your head as you're wearing it. Okay, so that's one of the reasons for the increases and the decreases in the stitches. Now, I have shown in a previous video what happens if you don't decrease your needle size for the ribbing at the bottom of the hat, and what usually happens is you'll end up with this kind of like wide stretchy edge, and then when you do your stitching over top of it, especially if you're used to doing something like a cable, which is really tight anyways because you're doing the crossing of the stitches, when you're doing that, you're gonna be pulling the stitches closer together anyways, so you're gonna want to have that really nice tight ribbing so that we don't have that kind of silly flare out at the bottom of the hat when we are working on that hat. Now, I think I showed it in the neater ribbing video, so if you want to have a look at that, it's linked below in the description. Once you actually have the kind of basics of the hat, you really can just go to town and do whatever it is that your heart desires as far as like striping or colors. I think probably next time when we do a hat, we should talk about how to transition and how to bring your yarn along as you're working through, say, a Fair Isle type of pattern, which is usually like a snowflake. I mean, they have so many different versions of that. It's just the way that the chart is done and how to read one of those square charts to actually make a picture show up in your knit. I'm really excited to show you guys that. And for now, we're going to continue working on the top of the crown of this hat, and I'm going to come back towards the end. I will put the rest of the pattern into the description below, so give a pause here, as I'll be back in a few seconds with finishing off the hat at the crown, and I'll actually show you what the crown looks like once we've kind of decreased a bunch of our rows and show you kind of like how that striping works its way up up the hat. Any questions, of course, put those in the comments below, and give the video a pause, and I'll come back in just a moment to show you the final shaping of the crown, what that looks like. All right, so here we are now at the end of our decrease rows. We have about 17 stitches on our 3 needles here. Now I have gone back to the double pointed needles because, as I said earlier, it started to get tight on my round needles. So I converted back to the double pointed. Now what we have here is just an abundance of stitches on one of the needles, but it doesn't really matter as long as we have our circles still happening. If you can see here, what I have done is at the end of my decreases, I opted to do my decrease with the knitted stitch on top. Now what I mean by that is I knitted the first stitch because the first stitch that we do in our knit 2 together is going to end up underneath the top one. So what I did is I knitted the first stitch, and then I wanted my purl to actually go underneath, so it kind of disappeared into this row here when we did our knit 2 together. So our knit stitch stayed on top, our purl stitch went underneath. So at the beginning of the row, I knit the first stitch and then knit 2 together for all the rest of the stitches around over top of the purl stitch that I was doing. So now we have our stitches left on our needle. We're pretty tight up here to the center, so I don't want to knit 2 together on any more stitches. I don't want to cinch my circle any more or any tighter than it already is. So we're gonna actually do our cast off row, but instead of actually casting off, I'm gonna do a little bit of a different method. So what I tend to do is I use my crochet hook. This is a 3.5 millimeter crochet hook. You can use any size that's actually smaller than the one that the needles are that we're using. So we're using 4 millimeter knitting needles, so I'm using a 3.5 millimeter crochet hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slip all of the stitches from my first needle onto the hook. So we're going to start here at the opposite end of the needle because we want to go so that we can hook our yarn and pull through all the stitches. So I'm actually going to bring these stitches over towards the tip of the needle and just transfer them over to the crochet hook. So there's 1, 2. So I'm just slipping them as they sit on the knitting needle. So there's no twisting happening, just slipping them right over onto the knitting needle or onto the crochet hook. Okay. So now we have 1 free knitting needle. Now I'm actually going to take the long tail of my yarn and we're going to cut it. And you want to make sure that you have enough yarn to go through all the stitches and then cinch it up tight. So I'm giving it about, I don't know, 6 inches or so, and we're going to cut it off. Maybe a little bit more. I'm not good with inch measurements. Anyways, all right. So now we're going to loop our tail of our yarn over the crochet hook, and we're going to slip this yarn through all of the stitches. So what I've actually done is I turned everything around. So now all the stitches are on my crochet hook, but my crochet hook is now in my right hand because that's the hand I crochet with. All right, so now we're gonna wiggle our crochet hook through the stitches and make sure everything is looped. So now we're gonna pull it out. So now we can see all of our stitches basically are just left loose and sitting on top of our hat. So now we're gonna do the same thing with the next needle. So we're going to slide this down this way to the tip and slip all of our stitches over onto the crochet hook again. And there's that needle free now as well. Catch our yarn over the crochet hook and slide it. You may have to wiggle to kind of make sure we don't catch anything else. Any of the stitches from the row. And now we're going to do this finally with our last knitting needle. All right, so slip everything. Slip everything over onto the crochet hook again. Last 4 stitches. And loop our yarn over the crochet hook, turn it upside down so we can pull it through and pull through all the stitches. At this point now we are essentially finished. What I usually do is I will take my crochet hook, come up through the center of the hat and loop it over and pull it down so that the tail goes on the inside. Whoops. The tail goes to the inside of the hat, and we just give our stitches a little tug, and we can weave in our end from here. So once it's woven in, it won't come loose. You can tie a knot over one of the stitches if you'd like. I don't really find it necessary, but of course that's always an option. I don't like having knots against my kids' heads when they're wearing, their hats down tight over their ears and stuff. So now we're going to weave in all of our ends. So I have shown a little bit of weaving in ends in the past. We're going to continue with our crochet hook, although you can use a darning needle. So this is completely fine if you want to thread it onto a yarn needle and just kind of catch some stitches with it. It's also fine if you tend to leave longer ends to make, sewing in the ends with the darning needle easier for you. I tend to just use my crochet hooks because they're always available while I am knitting and crocheting. So with weaving in ends, I tend to try to match up my colors and weave my ends in so they're less visible when you see from the front. They're really not visible either way, but I just tend to match up my colors. That makes it easier for me. So in this case, I'm gonna come down, straight down, and catch this knit stitch, which is from the Knits and Purls and the ribbing. And I'm just gonna continue to kind of loop over the edge of that, and we're really never gonna see it again. It's gonna disappear. And if I kind of give that a little bit of a tug, bring it to the front, and there's nothing. You can't see that stitch happening, or that weaving happening in the back. So you can continue catching those strands of yarn down the hat. There is other ways to weave in ends as well. Sometimes people will actually, the way that my mom taught me to weave in ends when I was knitting was to follow a piece of yarn. So follow a stitch along a row. So in this case, let's go the other way. So if we're doing from here, hopefully you can see this. So what I would do here is I'll catch this light pink here at the bottom. We'll follow the teal. So we'll put our yarn over there, and then we'll follow it back up this way like that, and then each piece of yarn actually goes up a second row. So now we're going to catch, let's hold that tight here. Okay, so we're going to actually catch, following this teal here that's happening, it goes down this way, and then it comes back up around the purple, and then comes down back down here. So we're going to catch the purple, and we'll follow that little bit of teal. There we go. It's a little tight because that's our tighter ribbing to prevent the extra spacing happening. Okay, so now we're going to come up one more stitch across this light pink right here. Hopefully you can see this. And we're going to catch our yarn here. And yes, I tend to flip my hat around as I need it to be moved so that I can see where everything needs to go and insert my crochet hook properly. All right, so catch it, yarn coming back down through the dark purple, and then back underneath this pink, and then this way. All right, so that's pretty well woven in now. All right, so sometimes as well, when we're looking at the front of the hat, we'll see something like this where there's kind of like a hole. What I'll often do is I will come back with my, with my knitting needle, and I'll just kind of give it a bit of a tug and pull it down the row and kind of even things out a little bit so that it's less visible in that one spot. So it does, you know, open up the stitches a little further down the row a little bit more, but it does give a bit more of a tighter area around where the hole was seen. So we don't want to actually see any holes. So I'll just follow the yarn and we'll just kind of tighten and loosen things up down the row so that way we can't see that hole anymore. So there we go. And now the hole is less visible anyways. That's it. So when we're going to finish weaving in our ends, it's going to take a little while. All right, and finally, just to finish off this hat, we're going to add a cute fuzzy pom-pom here. And so I bought these online. I'll link in the description below if you wanted to order some of these from Amazon. They're awesome. They took a little while to get here, but I just love the color. There's the package was 12, and it came. It has a couple of gray ones, a couple of white ones, these like kind of brownie colored ones with the black tips. I just love them. There's black and lots of colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it, and it has this great loop on the bottom, so it's a little bit of an elastic. I'm going to catch my finishing yarn that I pulled back through to the bottom. I brought it back out to the top, and we're going to sew this on with that yarn. So we're going to add a couple of stitches through and attach our pom-pom this way. We'll catch our couple of stitches, and hopefully you can see that. I just caught a couple of stitches. Now we're going to cinch this up a little tighter, come back through our loop like that. And then go back, catch a couple of other stitches in another direction so the pom-pom stays nice and tight on the top of the hat. All right, so now we're going to come back up through the hole, catch our yarn, and down we go. And now we can, in this case, because we added a pom-pom now, which I forgot I was adding. She asked me to add to the hat, my daughter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch another loop here at the bottom. There's two there, so I'm just going to pull it through the two loops and make sure I have a little bit of room on at the beginning. So there, now I have a little bit of a loop, and I'm just going to tie a single knot in this just to kind of give it some added structure so it doesn't go flying, and then I'll just weave in my ends as normal. There we go. All right, so that's the inside of the hat. Tied one single knot just on our pom-pom, and there we go. A cute and adorable little girl hat.